So in week 7 for us, we are looking at Kit K Theme L, Early Phonetics, which is tasting consonants. And this isn't a super long theme, but so I've tried to show some ways that you can extend it, as well as give you some information about what I had to do for myself to wrap my head around this. It's not hard, it's just hard for me. Okay, so first of all in the theme, the big ideas are that representing aspects of the pronunciation of words is the least important concern of real spelling. And this is, I've put up our little social studies conflict poster, because in some areas of the world, or in our school, phonics is, the way everything's taught. Phonics, 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 phonics. But in the real spelling framework, phonics is there. It's just not the most important thing. And this lesson in particular talks about phonics and what is important to take away from, and it's not phonics, phonology, okay? So I drew my own little bubbles here to represent a slide that Melvin has, that our main concern, our first concern, primary concern is morphology, and then it moves to etymology, and finally to phonology. It's the same thing that happens here in our stuck on a spelling poster. What does it sound like is at the bottom, and instead we're trying to get kids and ourselves to start with what does it mean, how is it built, and what are the relatives, okay? So he does recognize, and the reason why we're doing the theme is we're not saying phonics isn't necessary, we're just saying the right phonics. Real phonology, if you will, is what's necessary. So this theme teaches the best way to track segments of pronunciation is to say them to yourself and feel what the word is like. And that's very important because all the phonics teaching that I did was about sound. What does it sound like? Never did I talk to you about how it felt. So that's a big thing. And that consonant phones and phonemes can be identified by what the lips, tongue, and I added in teeth are doing, because I did a lot of work on myself, and those were certainly places I felt words. And that slash brackets represent phonemes, okay? So and this helps us with this, I know I've been using them before, but this really is a good way to indicate them in this theme. Some of the things that I came up with that I want to sort of explode into our other areas is this is going to get right at the heart of when we say to a child, sound it out. And then we get what we get, right? Because of the way they sound it out, or if that's their only avenue. So I can imagine myself, trying to say things like, don't just hear it, but feel what's happening as you do this, after I've done all this work. Or feel the letters as you say it, and then spell it. Now, we're not looking at all the letters, but it is going to be something that we want to fall back on, and it will take practice, because it was really hard for me to recognize it myself. It's just not something I've ever paid any attention to. Melvin also stipulates in his user's self-training manual, which is the big one. This is chapter F, which is also in your folder, but it's chapter F out of here. He also gives a little more information. Pronunciation is not a predictable indicator of a word's spelling in English. And this is important and helps with some of the frustration that we have from speakers of other languages where it is an indicator. Christian was just in here. He speaks Croatian. A letter in Croatian makes a sound. It's very simple. You can sound it out. It doesn't work like that in English, but it's just the way it is. English spelling only notes pronunciation if it helps to establish or distinguish sense and meaning. We need to confine the work we do in phonology to base words. So before you sort of look at it with a phonology lens, make sure the word is broken into its base. Take off its prefixes and suffixes. Okay? Now these two, I can't honestly tell you I understand fully, but I'm hearing them and I'm trying to look for examples in my own practice. Okay? And I took this off. Another thing that I need to tell you, and this was the part that was hard for me and will probably be hard for a lot of our kids, but is that we don't want to add sounds when we're working with letters. So if we ask them to say the sound S, the letter S, as S, not S, or ba, right? And it's hard. It's hard for me. Yeah. And so we need to be very careful with that, and that's going to be a lot of the training, is getting them to feel it and hear themselves and really work on that. I don't know if this is right or not. It probably isn't. But when I was doing it yesterday, the softer I was, the better I was. when I was loud, I ended up adding a whole bunch of sounds. I don't know if that has anything scientifically. I took down a recommendation here because I had spelled a word wrong, but one of the recommendations he did have, though, is as we're getting kids, and it's kind of a balance, as we're getting them to think about feel, you do have to stretch it out long enough for them to identify it, but don't let them add anything in. So with the letter B, it would be
When did you learn how to do the sounds like that?
Years ago. But I've very much been teaching kindergarten and phonemic awareness, right? It's not a ma or and it's the one that stops it. There's the ones that stretch it out, and then there's the ones that are stop sounds. But I think it's also working with kids that have a lot of speech issues and things like that too, and talking to speech therapists over the years.
okay. So the basic theme. Excuse me. Sorry, not right now. The basic theme is to be using identified letters to practice feeling these how these sounds and words are in our mouths. And so Melvin in the theme gives us some to work with. I've put these on a server and the words that you use with them. It is an oral theme, okay? But you can always go back to looking at words and taking off prefixes and suffixes and talking about different pronunciations and why and how. But what I did today is just around the theme. And then I was having such a difficult time with it myself. And last year I was in contact with some teachers in Beijing that wrote up some good lessons on this. And one of the teachers was a speech pathologist, right? Like she's a full speech teacher. So if you're a speech person, this is very natural and normal to you. And the first part of their lesson was make sure every child has a mirror so that they can see it. Well, I didn't have a mirror. So this is what I played around with yesterday. Don't be afraid. Because I was having a hard time with it. So I set myself up on a little bit of an inquiry. And this is what Melvin says phonics, or real phonetics, phonology, tries to answer questions like, how do we produce the sounds that we make when we speak? How do we do that? What does our body do to do that? Where are your tongue, teeth, and lips when you are making the sound of speech? And are your vocal cords vibrating or not? And where does the sound emerge from? So I built myself a little inquiry project on this. I used these. I followed his theme. So these were the first that were introduced, were letters, phonemes that use the lips. And then I kept doing it, and I kept doing it, and I was trying to feel it, and then I wrote up my own what I noticed, what I felt. Now, I don't know if these are accurate, but that's the whole point, kind of, is I'm trying to find it myself. I can look at it off that, or if you, in the upper grades, had a kid do it, and you recognize that they're saying, something wacky, they're going to need a little work with this, with getting in touch with that if we've not had any practice. This could be a fun little tech thing, especially if you have the cameras. It was easy. I did it in photo booth. The other thing that you're missing, though, is my auditory. So you can't hear me get better if I got softer, which I kept practicing. So, and again, I just wrote these up for myself to try to understand. I was thinking about where's the air coming from? Am I using my stomach? Is it coming from there? We went through phonemes that use the lips, phonemes that use the lips and teeth, where the tip of your tongue is located, so you're really identifying that, and you could prompt that with the kids and then they write what they feel, and speech sounds that come out of your nose, and that could just be a fun one. But if you plug your nose and try to say a sentence that he provides, you can just feel it. It feels like you're going to sort of explode up here. So there's a lot of fun things that could be done with this, but I think the caution is, I looked at the theme at first and thought, oh yeah, and then it was hard for me. It was very hard for me to get in touch with that and to feel what it was I was supposed to feel, because I have had no practice. So some of our kids are going to struggle with this, especially ESL kids, because their native language may not even make this sound. So we're literally having to show them how to do it, or kids that already have a speech issue, or you. So take your time with this theme. It is the only one we're doing next week. And if some people have access to other resources that will provide, Laura was talking about in-service she did 1,000 years ago, where they actually have cards that show it. And I remember, Emily, last year you had a picture of the lips with the letter on the front. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, but our idea is that we start getting kids about feeling. Okay? All right, I'm going to turn it off unless you want to ask a question for everybody. Okay. We always end up talking after I
want
turned
us
it
to?
off. I do. It's just I can't see you. I mean, they can't.